Some brands are legendary. In every category, someone sets the standard, and some companies create raving fans. Join Scott Wozniak and Caitlin Johnson of Swaz Consulting as we dig into the tactics and tools behind great organizations. How did the legends do it? And how can you become a legendary brand too? Well, Caitlin, as we come to the end, this is the final episode in our mini series on great hiring, which is one of the keys to great operational excellence. We've been talking about the 3 C's, and we realized just talking about this, reviewing what we did and where we at this week. And it was like, oh man, there's a whole bunch of process things that aren't, we really got specific into basically the content of the process. What are you looking for? By the way, if you haven't heard those 3 C's, go back and catch the earlier episodes where we talk about what they are and why they're so important. They're character, chemistry, and competence. Mm-hmm. But there's some process stuff, some best practices that we've learned that would probably be useful as we're going to go through this whole thing back and forth. And so let's wrap up by just kind of giving a high level list of some of the bullet points, right, on what makes for a great deal. And so the first one, this might sound obvious, but I don't know if we actually said it in any of the earlier episodes. I don't remember saying this, is you want to build your interview questions based not just on your company values, maybe that's where character comes in, but also on the job description. Like if this is what we need them to do, we should ask questions about each major part of that job description.
Exactly.
And so you've got a certain set of questions that you come in with and say, hey, tell me about a time when you did this, and how about this, and what does this look like for you? There's certain things you need. Here's the values we want. Here's the job we want. And you got to ask about those. Mm-hmm. And then there's things that are specifically based on their scenario, and we go through this. Which leads to the next thing. I think it's really critical that you have multiple people interview every single person in this process.
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea to have a second pair of eyes, so to speak, or a third pair of eyes to just kind of get their perception of the individual and see if it's an equal experience across the board.
Yeah. Listen, there's a humility here, right? Like the blind spot is the word I was going to say before. I've done this. I've had bad hires. And afterwards, people were like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, I could have told you that. And I'm like, no, I didn't see it. I'm a good read of people. If I'm good, maybe it means my percentages are higher than average. There's nobody, I think, who's perfect at this. And so it's my own biases. I mean, let me give you the most obvious bias that we all wrestle with. The perfect person left to myself, guess what? They're a lot like me.
You, yeah.
Thank you, right? Because I'm pretty.
And that may or may not be a right fit because there already is a you.
Thank you. No, that's it. Even if they are really good, maybe what we need on the team is the stuff you don't do, and we want to add more competency. And a whole bunch of Scots will all be really good at only half of maybe a quarter of the equation. And so getting other people's perspective, they're going to catch stuff that I wouldn't, because I'm going to get excited and be like, oh, great answer. And they're like, wait a minute. He actually didn't. That was very vague. He's like, no, I'm sure he meant this way because it's like me. Like, no. And so multiple people will catch different things in the conversation. So now what does that look like? It could be that you get 2, 3, 4 people interview the person all at the same time. I've seen this before where you're like, hey, a team of us are going to talk to one I've even seen where a team of us are going to have a team of people do a group project and talk through, and 4 of us are going to watch 8 of you do stuff together, and we're all going to compare notes and talks. That's if you're going to crank a lot of high volume stuff out. Right. A lot of Chick-fil-A franchisees will do that as a first time interview because they have literally every week they have another 20 people who want to do for a job. Yes. But I've also had the other end, my job on the high end when I was at Chick-fil-A, I interviewed individually with different, now one time, like the presentation we talked about in a previous episode, that was with a group of people. But a lot of these is like, I'm going to go talk to her and then him, then her. And in one day, I would talk to 4 or 5 people.
Right. Which can be a lot.
Yes. Again, but extreme end of the continuum. I don't think everybody has to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think on average, when I think about the different jobs I've applied for, I would say on average across the board, it was probably 3 or 4 people, maybe 2 at the minimum.
Just going to say, Three tends to be 3 to 4, tends to be the kind of, we can cover the content and enough eyeballs get on them to say, I think they're the right person.
Right.
Again, ballpark. It's a range. The more entry level and the less time effort the job requires. I mean, it's a totally brand new entry level position, and there's no skills expected. Well, then that competency check's pretty quick, right?
Yeah, you probably don't have the skills.
Yeah, it's the old fog a mirror test. Like you put a mirror up, and if their breath fogs, then hey, you made it. You're competent.
I think we talked about this with McDonald's. Didn't you say like all you have to do is press submit and you're basically hired on the application?
Even then, we'd recommend a little more than that test.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you have a small test there versus maybe a very nuanced technical position. We really need to see. So there's ranges here, but yeah, 3 to 4. Maybe you get one of those, you have 2 or 3 people sit in on it. It's a team meeting or something. There's a lot of creative way. Remember we talked in chemistry, take them out to lunch. That's actually like a group interview experience. It's casual, but you get a feel for them. So that might count as one of your 3 or 4 touch points. But yeah, it's multiple people and multiple steps. And again, people will say, I don't have time for that. Scott and Caitlin, you guys are crazy. I don't have time for that. And guys, the hard news is you don't have a choice. You're going to either put in time to hire with excellence or you're going to put in a lot of time managing misfit employees.
Which is worse.
Yes.
So much worse.
You're going to put in time. You get to put in a little time with hiring or a lot of time with misfit employees. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it's a lot of work. Yes, it's disruptive. But it's less disruptive than having a misfit employee and having to go through that hiring process again.
Yeah.
So job interview, like job description interview questions, resume specific interview questions.
Yes.
Multiple people
Committee.
doing multiple touch points with them. Yes, even for entry level roles. And then this is key. Make sure that everybody uses the same rubric.
Right. You're scoring the candidate on the same level, basically.
Yeah. When you think about this, and then you holistically look through the rubric together and think about how does this all fit together? Pros and cons. Let's talk about all here. You had talked about the stool metaphor.
I did. Yeah. So when you're thinking about the 3 C's, the character, competence, and chemistry. And so we're very passionate about if you needed to fudge one or wiggle on one, right? So if you think about a 3-legged stool, if one leg was a little bit too short or maybe just a little bit too long, it would be that competence factor. You can still sit effectively, it might wobble a little bit, right? So having these 3 C's is like the 3-legged stool. If you don't have one of them, you're going to completely fall. So you do need the 3. But if you needed to just wobble a little, wobble on the competence. And so if you design a rubric with that in mind, then everyone's looking for the same type of elements in the same type of way as best as possible based on their perception of how the interview is going.
Yeah. And then the team has a debrief conversation after talking to the candidates using the same rubric. Hey, we all asked these questions. We all looked for these things. What'd you think about his character? What'd you think about his chemistry? What'd you think about his and competence is very specific. Character is very specific, right? Like, how did he do on this trait? Did you see evidence of that trait in her? And did you notice when he did that presentation, he really was good at this piece? I didn't see, he seems to not understand this part of the job. And so, but if we have the same rubric and we have a debrief conversation through this, it should emerge like, man, she is awesome. We got to get her on the team. Or maybe she's wobbly, to use your school metaphor. Wobbly school. What are we going to do here? Which gets us to probably the most important and the most difficult kind of process recommendation that we'll make. And that's when in doubt, say no.
I know. Doesn't that hurt? I mean, because really think about you've invested some time with this person, but after that committee debrief, if there is doubt, it is truly best to say thanks, but no thanks.
I hate this because I'm an optimist who's a people developer who always sees the potential. And I'm like, we can make it work. And this has been a lot of my bad hiring mistakes, right? Is I'm like, I will coach. I'm a coach.
I see a lot of that person in me or vice versa or whatever, right?
you're like, oh, it's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
When in doubt, say no. Now, okay, there's an asterisk here. Okay, you can go back and say, okay, I'm not sure. Let's test for that. It's this one thing we're not sure on. Now,
Okay.
there's two kinds of doubt. There's the doubt of like, I saw what happened and I don't think he's got, like, he did not show up well here, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's good here and here, but it doesn't look like he has that character trait. In fact, it looks like he has an opposite character trait, or he did the job and he didn't do this part of the job well. He was bad at
Right.
doubt because we got evidence that is a bad mark on their record, right? Like they did a bad,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also doubt with like, you know what? That just didn't come up anywhere in our process. Somehow we just didn't cover that. We didn't
Right.
see how would he handle this part of the job, and it's a really critical part of the job, and we just don't know. Could he handle that kind of thing? That's a different kind of doubt. If that doubt is in place, like I have no data, not I have bad data, I have no data, you might go back and get more data. I've
Mm-hmm.
literally like, hey, candidate, can we do one more conversation? Or we need to see one more thing. And you go back and, or maybe it's down to two candidates and you're like, which one of them is better? I don't know. Go back to both of them. Say, we're down to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have a conversation about this, or you show, maybe this is where you would be willing to spend the money we talked about in competence. Say, we'll
Yes.
pay $500 to
Yeah.
find out. I want to compare side by side two implementation plans. And now,
Mm-hmm.
no, okay. So there's the no data doubt. But if you have doubt, you either go get more data or you say no. Now,
Or you say no.
there's this is bad. I hate this, right? Because what if she was awesome and I said no to her? That's the risk here. It's like you missed on a rock
The
star.
fear of missing out. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Dang it.
You have
FOMO.
FOMO.
It's
Right.
real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guys, there's another thing you should be afraid of. It's the fear of hiring somebody who
Mm-hmm.
turns out to be a bad employee. Like,
Mm.
systematically, you cannot eliminate all of these perfectly. The amount of time and effort it takes to get perfect clarity on every person is an unrealistic process, right?
Mm-hmm.
We work for 2 years full time together for free, and then I know you're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna have to take a risk. Albeit this whole process is trying to limit the amount of risk, but there's always a tiny bit left over, and you can systematically lean one way or the other way. And there's two risks: false positive and false negative. False positive is they look like they're a positive fit, but they're not. It's false. False negative, it looks like they're not going to be a fit, but you know what? They were going to work out. And you can go find stories of both of those. People
Yes.
who were like, oh, he didn't fit the mold, but he turned out to be our best employee. Wow, I'm so glad we hired that guy. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe he checked all the boxes and he was a dud. He did not deliver. It was so frustrating. Those are both going to happen. There's no hiring process in the world I know that's realistic that will eliminate this ever happening to you ever again. You're just going to reduce the odds, right? The times it
Yes.
happen will be less. So you're going to have risk. Systematically, one of these is much more expensive than the other one by
Yeah,
far.
absolutely. Yeah. And, and I want to say this is tricky. This takes some time to really think about what the 3 C's are for you and within your organization. And there's been actually a client that we worked with fairly recently who did a phenomenal job with their employees and upskilling them and trying to reinforce a growth mindset. And they wanted to really scale and start to bring in and hire more people. And they brought us in to help them with a training program. And we started asking them some questions of like, well, tell us who you're hiring so that we know we're training the right people that have the right character and the competency and the chemistry. And so we're like, can we look at your job descriptions? And it was so interesting that the job descriptions, because in a previous episode that we've shared that sometimes the job descriptions are just so vague and generic. And they live and breathe by their values in this company, but the values were never stated in the job description. So even right off the bat, the pipeline of candidates wasn't specific enough. And so we worked with them to tweak their job description to make sure that they were having the job descriptions do some of the heavy lifting for them. Because if you think about that as a tool out in whatever job search, engine you're using or job board, you want to try to bring in and attract the right people. Reminds me of that episode. Yes.
Right?
Yes. Your mind is thinking like mine. It reminds me of that other episode where it's saying no to candidates and, almost like intimidate the wrong type of candidate away from your business.
Yeah.
And so, we've worked really closely with this organization to fine tune the resources and help them gain clarity on what does it actually look like to hire in that organization, the right chemistry, character, and competence. And are we pulling it through in our job description?
Yeah. And this, what we've been gone through is still, we could have gone deeper on all these pieces, and there's probably more. And this is why we call it a mini series and not like could be the whole podcast ever and always. I'll say, but this is the challenge, is so much of your business depends on having the right people. And really, we're talking about professionalizing your hiring process. Mm-hmm. And most people are like, wait a minute, I'm a master accountant. I'm a graphic designer. I'm a commercial construction leader. Like, I'm not a professional hiring person. I get it. So this is where sometimes people will hire us. And so if that is the kind of thing you want help with, there's people like us and other firms who you can contact and say, just design this thing for me. Because you're smart enough. If someone said, ask this question and look for a good answer, you know that. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't have to do this alone. You can get... Now, maybe you're the big enough company, you need to hire an HR leader, and this is what it's time to build your HR function out.
Sure.
But in between there, maybe you just hire an expert. I do this all the time for us. Come in and teach us how to do this thing, and then my team will put the process together and we'll have a rock star process. Don't give up because you're not a professional hiring expert. You can still get professional hiring level work done by hiring out that piece. And then from here on out, everything in your company gets better. It is worth the time and the effort to do this like a pro. So we're going to wrap up our mini series. We've got some really fun ideas for the rest of this year on stuff we're going to dig into. But man, at the heart of this deal, all the grand ideas, all the great customer experience, all the stuff we have assumes you have the right people. Get the right people and everything else is easier to do. And if you don't, you're just adding a penalty on top of everything else.
Don't work with the misfits.
And you know what? Maybe it's actually not good for them either. Like no one wants to be in that role. It's a difficult moment, but some of the best moments of my life were when people have said, Scott, this is not you. Why don't you leave and move on and go do something else that's better than you? And I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't had people courageously close some doors on my life and say, you're right. It's good for everybody involved. It's just work. So do the work, get the team, and go create raving fans. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to sign up for our weekly newsletter. It's all new content with the same themes. You can subscribe for free and learn more about how we partner with our clients to build legendary companies at swozconsulting.com. That's www.swozconsulting.com. And if you want to get access to the actual tools and techniques that we use with our elite consulting clients, check out our online program at legendarybrandsacademy.com. That's www.legendarybrandsacademy.com. Greatness is possible. You just have to build the right engine.